This is the Public Health and Safety Committee meeting. We do have a quorum with myself, Vice Chair Huffman, Council members Benton, Bradford, Gregg, Nash, Porterfield, and Prep-T. We did not have anyone signed up for public comment. I got her. I got Madam Chair. We didn't have anyone signed up for public comment. Is there anybody in the back who would like to speak? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody run to the podium. So we will go ahead on to our legislative agenda. I do have everything on a tentative consent agenda. Is there anybody who would like to pull anything off of my proposed consent agenda? Council member Benton, you're recognized.
It's number 3.
Number 3.
1301.
Okay. I will not put that on consent. Thank you very much. Anyone else have anything they'd like to pull off? Okay. Well, then we will go ahead and I'll start reading and then I'll do another check and then we will vote and discuss if necessary. Okay. Item number 1 is RS 2025-1298. A resolution accepting a grant from the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Davidson County Juvenile Court to implement a safe baby court program, an evidence-based specialized infant and toddler court that uses the science of early childhood development to meet the urgent needs of infants, toddlers, and their families. Sponsors Porterfield Evans and others. Item number 2, RS 2025-1299, a resolution approving an application for a community correction services grant from the Tennessee Department of Corrections to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the state trial courts to provide alternative supervision and treatment options to divert felony offenders from the Tennessee prison system. Sponsors Porterfield Evans and Welsh. Item number 4, RS 2025-1302, a resolution approving amendments 1 and 2 to a grant from the Tennessee Housing Development Agency to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Action Commission to be used for the Emergency Rental Assistance Eviction Program in accordance with the purposes set forth in Section 3201 of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to provide financial assistance and housing stability services to eligible tenants. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, and others. Item number 5, RS 2025-1304, a resolution to approve the third amendment to the lease agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and Nashville Metropolitan LLC for office space at 1281 Murfreesboro Pike, Nashville, Tennessee. Sponsors Porterfield, Gamble, and Evans. Item number 6, RS 2025-1308, a resolution approving Amendment 1 to a viral hepatitis program services grant from the Tennessee Department of Health to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Board of Health to implement and coordinate activities and services related to the prevention, testing, diagnosis, surveillance, and linkage to treatment and other support services for individuals infected with viral hepatitis. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, and others. Item number 7, RS 2025-1314, a resolution accepting a grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Office of Family Safety to fund fatality review team staffing positions to help manage the multidisciplinary needs of its clients. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, and others. Item number 8, RS 2025-1315, a resolution approving Amendment 2 to a Victim of Crime Act or VOCA grant from the Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Metropolitan Government, acting by and through the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department to fund additional staffing, enhance services, and serve more victims of crime. Sponsors Porterfield and Evans. Then we have on bills on second reading, item number 9, BL 2025-847, an ordinance approving a revised organizational plan for the Metropolitan Public Health Department of the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County. Sponsors Evans, Welsh, and Ewing. Item number 10, BL 2025-848, an ordinance approving an agreement between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Nashville Fire Department, Emergency Medical Services Division, and the Ascension St. Thomas EMT Training Program to provide the Ascension St. Thomas School of EMS students with practical experience in EMS-based patient care activities. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, Welsh, and others. Item number 11, BL 2025-849, an ordinance granting Amendment 3 to a contract between the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County and Digitech Computer LLC for fire, medical emergency billing, and collection services. Sponsors Porterfield and Evans. Do I have a motion? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Anyone need anything pulled off? Okay, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? All right, so we recommend approval on those items. Let me count. Thank you. We have 8 people. So we have approved our consent agenda with 8 in favor, 0 against, and 0 not voting. So we'll go and pick up item number 3. Take care. Have a good night, gentlemen. Our item number 3 is RS 2025-1301. A resolution accepting and appropriating a donation from the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee in the amount of $13,104.10 to the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County, acting by and through the Metropolitan Human Relations Commission and authorizing the Metro Human Relations Commission to expend the donated funds to further its duties, responsibilities, and mission. Sponsors Porterfield, Evans, and Welsh. Do I have a motion? All right, it's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember, you changed your mind? Okay. All right. So any discussion on this item? All right. Let's vote then. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone not voting? Okay, we got 1 not voting. So it's 7 in favor, 0 against, and 0 not voting, but we recommend approval for that. Okay. We are going to transition then. One of the things that we did not do at our last meeting because we ran out of time is we didn't have an opportunity to review the kind of FAQ that was provided through the mayor's office related to the special called committee meeting on immigration enforcement. And so I left my document at home. However, Councilmember Huffman should have passed out another copy for everybody that's here. And so I thought we would just, first of all, I don't know if you've had a chance from the last meeting to now to review this information. If there's something in particular you want to ask questions about, otherwise I can go through each of these ones, make sure they're read out loud. And if anybody has a question that they would need to ask, Director Darby or the administration, that we can do that. I'm seeing nobody act like that's a bad idea. So we're going to go ahead and I will just start going through our list. So the first question that was directed towards MNPD was, what authority does MNPD have to prevent THP or ICE from enforcing on non-state owned property or streets? And the answer was none. The second question was, how often is the El Protector program evaluated? And then there was a follow-up about submitting the most recent evaluation for the officer in the protector role. And it says the El Protector program falls under the Office of Community Outreach and Partnerships. Like all MNPD programs, it's continually evaluated to ensure it best serves the needs of the community and the department. The person assigned to the El Protector position, like all Metro employees, undergoes an annual employee evaluation. The position is currently staffed by Officer Mario Diaz. A copy of Officer Diaz's most recent evaluation has been provided as requested. And then it says, for clarification, during the meeting, concerns were raised about social media activity by someone who previously served in the El Protector role. Officer Diaz is not the person whose social media activity was referenced. And then item number 3 was a request for records from the last video involved Metro car in a non-immigration stop. And it references that there was a pending criminal prosecution, therefore a criminal case file associated with that particular matter cannot be publicly released. There was a link included to the press release associated with that particular incident that is also listed in this file. And it says additionally, some public information on the case is available on the criminal court clerk's website. Item number 4 was how many patrols were near Nolensville and Harding 2 weeks prior to the immigration enforcement event, and again on May 3rd and 4th. It says the area of Nolensville Pike from Thompson Lane to Haywood Lane and Harding Place from Trousdale Drive to I-24 falls within MNPD zones 131, 321, and 823. There was a map included with this particular file that is not in your copy. And it says the following Saturday/Sunday calls for service or self-initiated activity occurred in these zones on recent weekends. April 19th to the 20th, 275. April 26th to the 27th, 239. May 3rd to May 4th was 243. May 10th to 11th was 213. And then May 17th to the 18th was 218. Item number 5 was what parts of Metro have higher crime rates? And there was a link to a report that breaks down crime in the city by precinct and by council district for all of last year. Item number 6, can MNPD commit to developing a community safety plan in 30 days? It says the MNPD is committed to meeting with any interested council members about their vision for a community safety plan. Community safety plans exist in various formats and may be police-created, community-created, or collaborative efforts between police and the community. And initial discussions should include members' vision, scope, and partnerships needed for a community safety plan. And of course, the community safety plan conversation is being addressed as part of the substitute budget. Item number 7, what time was the pictured helicopter dispatched? How long was it in the air? And what was the price per hour of operation? The aviation unit responded to the scene on 2 different occasions at the request of MNPD supervisors to provide estimates on crowd size. The first launch occurred at 12:25 p.m. and had a total flight time of 18 minutes. The second launch occurred at 2:40 p.m. and had a total flight time of 6 minutes. The total cost, including staff costs, was approximately $260. Item number 8, did notices of the call for service to DEC go up the chain? And the answer to that question was no. Of course, we all know that has been addressed. Item number 9, when a new officer comes in, what guidelines are given for ICE/immigration interactions? MNPD officers are advised that immigration enforcement is a function of federal law, that the MNPD plays no role in that process, and that they are required to report any contact with immigration officials in accordance with the mayor's executive order. Item number 10, will there be any new guidelines? And the answer is no. Item number 11, will MNPD make public records on this incident? To the extent, and the answer was to the extent that there are any public records associated with these incidents in MNPD possession, yes, the MNPD will supply those in accordance with state law. And so those are all the questions for MNPD that were on this document. Does anybody have any questions that you would like to ask some follow-up on? Councilmember Prepty, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And going back to question 7, I'm just curious, how many helicopters does MNPD have, and how many individuals are staffed per deployment of a helicopter?
Deputy Chief Gilder.
So the MNPD currently has 2 helicopters. I don't know how many were staffed on this particular flight operation. Obviously, there's a pilot that's piloting the aircraft, but oftentimes they have a flight officer that rides along with them that helps engage in communications with ground and whatnot so that the pilot can concentrate on their duties. I don't know if a flight officer was on that particular flight or not, but I can find that out for you and let you know.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have, I guess, a follow-up question for you, kind of related to that same one about the helicopter and the flight cost. So $260, that just struck me, that seems super cheap. And so I've never heard anything that cheap related to Metro government. And so is that this, would that be the same kind of expected cost? Like I know, like out my way in Hermitage, you know, Hermitage, there's often collaboration like with Mount Juliet Police or, you know, Wilson County or whatever. And so if we are assisting like other counties, is the cost about the same, or is it more, are we charging them like a higher rate in support, or how does that part work?
So typically on a mutual aid type request like that, we're not, absent some prolonged type of aid, if it's just a short assist on, you know, a fugitive maybe that's cross county line and, you know, we're assisting with that, we typically wouldn't charge the other agency for that. The cost is low here because the flight time was very low.
Okay.
So it's calculated based on an hourly basis they have an hourly rate based on fuel consumption and then also the employee's rate of pay. And that's how that number was derived. But again, that was a very short flight time. So it is expensive to maintain and own and operate helicopters, as you all know, because you guys bought them and pay the annual funding for that. But this was a relatively short flyover for a crowd size estimate. That's why the cost was pretty low.
Okay, thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate that. Any other questions for MNPD before we move on? Chair Porterfield, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a question for MMPD as much as it is just a statement. I know we talked about the community safety plan, and I just wanted to reiterate what you stated earlier. The budget does address the creation of a community safety plan, which will be led, it will be a community-driven process. So we want to make sure that we're looking at what the community is requesting, what the community is asking for, and this process will be led up through the health department. So I know I got some questions personally about people from the community, having concerns about, MMPD may have one vision for community safety. The community may have a different vision for community safety. So I just wanted to reiterate that what we're discussing in the budget is a community-led, community-driven process through the health department, which is separate from any initiative that the police department is doing. So I appreciate the work that MMPD is doing, but it's just a little separate from what we're talking about here. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear for anybody that may be watching.
Yes, thank you for providing that additional context. Anyone have any additional statements or questions? Okay. Then we'll go over to the next section, which is the law section, or the section that Metro Legal responded to. The first question is, was THP staging on Metro-owned property? And the answer was, we do not know. However, Metro parking lots are open to the public, including THP. Question number 2 was, are window tinting laws applicable to law enforcement? And the answer was partially. TCA 55-9-107A provides general restrictions on the tinting of car windows that are applicable to the public. However, TCA 55-9-107A 6A2 provides an exception to these general rules, which states the restrictions of the subsection A do not apply to any of the following motor vehicles. And item number 2, any motor vehicle bearing commercial license plates or government service license plates that are used for law enforcement purposes for those windows rearward of the front doors. Item number 3, what can Metro do to stop the separation of families and protect our own citizens? And the answer was Metro has no authority over immigration enforcement actions, and interfering with federal immigration enforcement could be a crime. Item number 4, what recourse does Metro have for ICE/THP conducting activities on Metro streets? And the answer was THP has very broad authority, broad enforcement authority that is not limited to state highways. ICE also has the authority to be on any public right-of-way. Item number 5, do EO30 reports appear online? Yes, they are posted on Metro's open data portal. Item number 6, what is THP doing when conducting stops, particularly with passengers? And the answer is the Tennessee Highway Patrol, THP, has broad statewide jurisdiction, including 1, to patrol the state highways and enforce all laws and all rules and regulations of the Department of Transportation regulating traffic on and use of those highways. Tennessee Code annotated 4-7-104(1) and 2, to enforce federal immigration laws while performing within the scope of their authorized duties as state highway patrol officers if they're certified in accordance with a memorandum of understanding between the state of Tennessee and the United States Department of Homeland Security pursuant to section 4-3-2015, and then 4-7-121. THP has now entered into a Section 287G agreement to assist federal authorities. The jurisdiction of THP for enforcing federal immigration laws is not limited to state highways. The Metropolitan Department of Law does not have any information about what THP is doing when it conducts stops or what basis it is relying on for those stops. Item number 7, what is the cost to place an attorney at all majority minor schools and charter schools? And the answer was 143 schools times $124,933.58 per attorney 1 would equal $17,865,501.94. Item number 8, what kind of help can be sent to a person who has ICE agents at a house? And it says, multiple Metro officials have recommended that all Nashville residents know their rights. And there's a reference to the Tennessee Immigration Refugee Rights Coalition's outline at their website that is not affiliated with Metro. It is tennesseeimmigrant.org. Beyond that, Metro cannot provide legal assistance to a person who has ICE agents at a house, nor can Metro interfere with such activity. Funds could be raised from private donors by a nonprofit, but Metro should not be a party to that. Item number 9, when does Public Chapter 1 take effect? And it says sections 3, 4, 7, and 8, which create new criminal offenses and penalties for local officials, take effect July 1st, 2025. Sections 10 to 15, which create new restrictions around driver's licenses and photo identification cards, take effect January 1st, 2026. And that was, that concludes the section for Metro Legal. Does anyone have any questions related to those answers for Metro Legal? Looks like Councilmember Sepulveda will. Pro Tem Sepulveda, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Can you reread in regards to the window tinting?
Yes. That is on page 3. It says the answer for our window tinting law is applicable to law enforcement. It says partially, TCA 55-9-107A provides general restrictions on the tinting of car windows that are applicable to the public. However, the code also provides an exception to these rules, which states the restriction of the subsection A do not apply to any of the following motor vehicles. Any motor vehicle bearing commercial license plates or government service license plates that are used for law enforcement purposes for those windows rearward of the front doors.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the vehicles that have been in the city have been rentals from out of state who have tinted windows, don't believe they had commercial license plates. So who do we need to speak to at MMPD in regards to enforcing the window tinting laws?
Director Deputy. Oh. Hey, Deputy Chief Gilder, can we get you back?
Sure. So you are allowed to have window tint, even forward of the rear windows. They just can only be to a certain percentage, and those have to be tested in order to conduct enforcement. I don't know the answer to this question because I've not looked into it. It might be something that Metro Legal needs to follow up on, but I don't know to what extent the federal government has to comply with a state statute regulating automobile requirements like that. There may be a supremacy clause issue. I don't know, but that would probably be something I would consult with the Department of Law with before we did any kind of enforcement.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Gilder. Can we get an answer from Metro Legal clarifying that? Because the windows were so tinted you cannot see anything through it, which is very different from regular window tinting.
Yeah, I'll put that on the follow-up list. Thank you, Pro Tem. How about other questions related to that section? Okay, let's go to the last section, fell under DEC. If a call comes into DEC about ICE, what is the protocol? And we know that that has been, Executive Order 30 was revised, and now that information is communicated with the mayor's office within 24 hours. Item number 2, can a department come back to council and report on changes implemented? The answer was yes, and we're happy to have individual conversations with council members. Director Martini is not here today. He was very open to coming. Last meeting, I directed him not to because I didn't know that we would get to this document, but he is very willing to speak to members that are specific questions about DEC. Item number 3, what training will the dispatcher receive to receive more information about what the word operations means? And it says the mayor's office is working with HR to provide training around Executive Order 30 for all department contacts. Item number 4, in addition to the phone number that is allocated for MNPD to request extra patrols, could a federal agent also request extra patrols through HUB? Have we considered asking for an employee ID to validate that the requester is a current employee? How frequently is the queue for extra patrols assessed? Is it based only on date, or will the keyword updates also elevate any patrol questions. And the answer is, any person, visitor or resident can request extra police presence either by phone using 862-8600 or 311, or the Hub Nashville website/app for any reason. That request is shared with the police department as soon as practical. If a specific time or date is not specified, or shortly before the time presence is requested. So if a time/date is specified and is filled at the discretion of law enforcement based on a variety of factors. There's not currently a procedure established to elevate a particular extra patrol request above any other, as they are all considered low priority, non-immediate requests for additional police presence that may or may not be fulfilled at the discretion of MNPD. And that was the last question for DEC. Pro Tem Sepulveda, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of more questions. Just today, we had the comptroller of New York City be arrested for asking for a warrant. Can we get clarification from legal in regards to our rights as elected officials when we are just observing, asking for warrants at the rate that we're going right now with this fascist government, being arrested just for trying to follow basic laws in which ICE doesn't seem to be doing so. So that's one question I have. I also have been seeing more and more reports of people who are impersonating ICE agents, who are, stealing, trying to kidnap people, and other various crimes. So what are we to do when ICE, Border Patrol, whatever it is, shows up at a place and they are not identifying themselves? Can we get clarification on that as well?
Yes. We have that on the list. How about any other questions related to this section? Councilmember Prepti, do you have a question? You're formulating it? Okay, I respect that. So we can come back to that. I'm going to move on with department updates if nobody has any questions, but you're welcome to Councilmember Huffman, you're recognized.
Yep, thank you, Chair. My question is not derived from this, but it is for a department that is here in relation to the topic.
Okay.
So OHS, if I could have a member of the OHS team come up. Simple question.
Hi, Director Calvin. I just put a mint in my mouth, sorry.
I timed that perfect. Just a real quick clarifying question. Are you aware of any interactions with any unhoused individuals with any ICE officials?
No, I'm not aware of any ICE interactions in the encampments. And our outreach team has been informed to be mindful of that as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Chair Prepti, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question's for MNPD, not necessarily in relation to ICE enforcement, but just generally with MNPD participation in federal task force, whether it be through the ATF, FBI, or another federal acronym. Whenever conducting joint operations, is there any policy in place that would require or limit Metro's participation in those activities if federal agents are not clearly marked or cloaked in some identifiable authority as federal agents? So in other words, is there any policy that currently exists that would limit MNPD's participation if federal agents are in plain clothes and not able to be clearly identified as law enforcement or federal agents?
So obviously, sometimes there are situations where we have to engage in undercover activity, and that's, our personnel will not be in plainly marked uniforms. But when we're conducting enforcement operations, they are expected to be in clearly marked uniforms. They are required, even if you're on a federal task force, you are required to abide by our departmental policies, and we have policies around that, wearing nameplates and body-worn cameras. So all of those policies still apply to you, even if you're assigned to a federal task force, even if you're conducting federal task force activities.
Okay. And so sort of just following up on that, even though federal agents wouldn't be bound by Metro policies in any way, completely understand that. Is there any policy that limits MMPD's participation if federal agents are not clearly identifiable?
I can say that I've not ever been aware of a situation where we have conducted enforcement with a federal partner and that they were not wearing, in situations where we're doing enforcement activity again, where they were not wearing clearly identifiable gear. Again, I don't have the ability to regulate what our federal partner wears or doesn't wear, but we do regulate what our employees would wear if they're involved in that activity. And so they would be clearly identifiable as a Metro police officer and wearing our patches and our body-worn camera and our nameplates. So again, I can't regulate a federal partner, but I'm not aware of that being an issue to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair Prepty. Okay, anybody else? Oh, Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you, Chair. This is regarding number 4, the request for extra patrol. It says there is not currently a procedure established to elevate a particular extra patrol request above any other, as they are all low priority, non-immediate request. That seems counterintuitive in a couple ways. Number one, there's no formal evaluation of this request and that it's assumed it's a low priority. Even outside of this situation, I know of situations in my district where I needed extra patrol. It bothers me that in writing it says those are low priority.
I see what you're saying. You want Deputy Chief Gilder is right behind us,
I would love
ready
some
to.
insight.
Okay, Deputy Chief.
Sure. So I'm not sure that was the MMPD response or if that was DEC's response. I can't remember which category.
It was DEC.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I was going to say I don't remember working on that. But I think what they're getting at is that we prioritize calls for service as code 1, code 2, and code 3. And there's low priority calls, medium priority calls, and high priority calls, right? Life's endangering type situations. So our high priority calls, lower priority calls are like calls like reports, extra patrols, things like that. It's not that it's not important. It's just that in the level of immediate response, or we're going lights and sirens, dropping everything we're doing to get there. If so, that's a high priority call. So that's what they mean by that. And there is no set process for the way extra patrols necessarily come in. In this particular case, someone called the DEC and spoke with a call taker and scheduled an extra patrol. Most of the ways, honestly, I didn't know you could do that, but so that was news to me. But the way normally we get extra patrols is, maybe I go to a call for service like you're saying, and I interact with you and you say, hey, I'm worried about my house, getting broke into. We've had issues going on. And I would say, hey, I can set up some extra patrols for you for the next, whatever time period. And we ask, we can either contact DEC and have them schedule that for us and say, hey, put in extra patrol for this location for the next, so many days. Or we just go back and tell, a supervisor and they schedule it with the other shifts and let them know and pass that on through roll calls that, hey, this address needs some extra patrol.
Thank you. That's a little bit more helpful. I think given the volatility of the environment we're in, this still should be addressed for future situations.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, Deputy Chief, for that follow-up. Anyone, Pro Tem Sepulveda, you recognize?
Sorry, last one.
No worries.
I know the answer to this, but I think it's important for my colleagues to have an official response from Metro Legal, given the number of elected officials that are being arrested by ICE agents at the moment. Is ICE allowed to arrest U.S. citizens?
You just want that as in writing for Metro Legal?
Correct.
Okay. We will add it to the list. All right. How about anyone else? Okay. With that, we're going to transition to department updates. I'm going to take Office of Homeless Services last because ours usually tends to go a little bit longer. Anything from District Chief Supreme Young? Nothing? Okay. Mr. Dodd, you're here. That's unusual for public health and safety. Do you have anything you need to share that's safety related? Okay. About Metro Health, anything on the Metro Health front? No, I'm seeing shrugs. Okay. Well, then we will pull up with Office of Homeless Services.
Director Calvin's just going to pass some packets around.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah. All right. I'm Allison Cantway with the Office of Homeless Services. As ever, we have a lot of data in our report for our ARP grantees. But I think it would be best to direct you to our highlights for this month, because we've had a lot of highlights in the last month. We've been very, very busy. So on June 4th, we hosted a State of Homelessness Symposium. We had nearly 300 attendees. We had some really incredible national expert speakers come in. Dr. Samson Barris, who pioneered the Housing First model, Roseanne Haggerty, who is the CEO of Community Solutions, which has done really incredible work around ending veteran homelessness. Dr. Richard Cho, who worked at HUD and who worked in the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. Major Ethan Frizzell, who is the area commander in Southwest Florida of the Salvation Army. And then, of course, our mayor came and conducted a town hall. All the attendees beforehand were given the opportunity to submit questions. We received a lot of them, and he answered many. I think the town hall was about an hour long. So that was really successful. It was really wonderful to see, folks from academia, folks from the service world, folks from government really talk about best practices around homelessness. And we were really excited to have that much interest from those outside speakers. We have recently released the numbers for the point in time count. We have to submit those numbers to HUD, and HUD has to, approve that submission before we share those publicly. And HUD was just a little late in doing that this year. And so the submissions closed last week. And so we submitted our number. The point in time count is where, on one night in the winter, at the end of January, us and every other municipality in the country, we count the number of unhoused folks, both that are staying in shelters, and then we use a group of volunteers here, over 100 people, to go out physically, street by street, and physically count the number of folks experiencing street level homelessness. So that could be folks on the street, could be folks living in their cars or in other places that are not meant for human habitation. We recorded 2,180 people experiencing that literal homelessness, which is a 4.1% increase from last year. And of those, 602 were unsheltered, sleeping outdoors in vehicles or in those other places not meant for human habitation. So we did see an increase of 4.1%. Obviously, that's something we always want to keep our tabs on and be very cognizant of. The increase nationwide from 23 to 24 was 18%. So we're still healthily below that rate, but it's, anytime that there is an increase, it's concerning. The other thing that I might add is that our unsheltered numbers this year were far fewer than last year. But last year on the point in time count, we went out and it was about 60 degrees. And so there were a lot of folks outside. This year, it was well below freezing. And so the Metro, our cold weather overflow shelter, was open that night. And so there were hundreds of people staying there. And so, while that unsheltered number has gone down, it's likely because a lot of those folks were in the cold weather shelter or in some other shelter just because it was really cold that night. Okay, in partnership with community organizations, we have successfully concluded our housing efforts at Anthony's Drive. So a total of 107 people were housed in either temporary or permanent housing. 48 pets were also housed. And of these 107 folks, 16 were placed in permanent housing right away. And then, of course, the other folks who were placed in temporary housing, the goal is to get them into permanent housing. And as you can see in our slide deck every month, we track all of those folks over the time that they're in interim housing. And we have a very good success rate with placing folks in permanent housing over time. So we're working really closely with Hospitality Hub, which is the vendor for the interim gap housing, and lots of other service providers to provide wraparound services. So those are things like mental health services, physical health services, employment services, all of the things that these folks will need. And then lastly, on May 21st, we engaged an outside facilitator to come in and do a community-wide, day-long session to really evaluate how we can grow as leaders in the community and as a community-wide team. So not any one agency, but all of us working together in the continuum of care. We were really excited to be able to do this. This is something we've wanted to do for quite a while. It was a very interactive session. We talked about how to navigate really tangible, difficult things, how to, really concrete conflicts, managing emotions, working through challenges. And so we had over 65 folks who registered for the event, which was really great. We're going to continue to engage that same facilitator. He is from Colorado, I believe, but we're going to have follow-up sessions with him. He intends to engage with us long-term. I think the first follow-up session is maybe in a couple of weeks. And so, all the agencies that were part will be able to connect with him virtually as well. Of course, there's a lot more information here in the packet, but I'll stop with those highlights in case there are questions.
I've got a question. I'll just start off the bat because as far as like kind of the increase that, we've seen from last year to this year related to the point in time count and everything, and kind of thinking about the pulling back and looking at the federal government and all the volatility that we are still seeing, especially around budget issues at the federal level and like discussions about HUD and vouchers and all those things. And this is kind of related also to OEM, has there been any discussion or is there a plan if we were to see a sudden surge of folks experiencing homelessness, what our response would be outside of like our regular processes, that you all are going with?
Yes, that's a fantastic question and certainly something that we've had our eyes on for months at this point. We rely really heavily on HUD funding here in Nashville to provide support and services to our unhoused. As I'm sure y'all recall, back in, it was either the end of January or beginning of February, there was that federal funding pause that hit everyone. And I think that was really galvanizing for those of us in the homelessness sector to say, okay, how are we going to prepare if we do lose these federal funds? So we have had lots of meetings with all of the agencies that receive federal funds to talk about not only what would be our plan and other sources of funding and other ways that we provide services, but also how do we adequately capture what these funds pay for in really concrete terms. So not just like the number of people served, but like, how many landlords are able to have their units leased because they're hooked up through the Low Barrier Housing Collective. How many children are being served and, kept out of homelessness. People with disabilities, that sort of stuff. So we spent a long time compiling a lot of that to have at the ready to really communicate to the community and to any sort of potential funder, state, local, federal, philanthropic, to show what those dollars do. And then, yes, there's been a lot of discussion and contingency planning around what are other sources of funding. The proposed budget at the federal level proposes really drastic cuts to HUD, where there are other federal funding sources that might be, more flush. Where are there state funding sources? How can we partner with one another? So yes, the answer is yes. There have been discussions on many, many, many different ways to draw those connections, and I think that the service providers are extremely interested in working together to make sure that like services don't drop off, even if one particular agency loses their grant or if one source of federal funding like HUD.
And so I guess have you all forecasted like even down to like, what if there's no federal funding at all across every agency and every provider and metro government and all that stuff?
Yeah,
What are,
absolutely.
okay.
Yeah.
So you're working on those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, I think that's where we started, honestly, with that federal funding pause of like, okay, what if this happens again where no one can access their funds? And I think that I'm sure all of y'all have seen various agencies put out feelers throughout the community and really look into ways to be creative.
Okay. Councilmember Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question, but I'm going to start with a statement. So tonight we're voting on an operating budget that drastically increases the funding for the Office of Homeless Services. I think that comes at a very important time considering funding is being cut everywhere, but even outside of OHS, between the Unified Housing Strategy and the money that is dedicated to emergency homeless services, it's an important investment. And I know I get a lot of phone calls, emails, text messages regarding concerned citizens in my community about the well-being about people in my district, as we all do. So it's just really, really important that we keep our eye on the ball and pass this budget tonight. So I'm just going to say that on the record. Now I'll get to my question. And this is a question that I know my answer to, but I want just to get it on the record for this room. Regarding the PIT count specifically, does that count people living in cars?
Yes, it counts anyone living in an emergency shelter, anyone living on the streets, in their cars, or in any other place that is not meant for human habitation. So, maybe if somebody is, sleeping under a park bench here, that would count. If they're sleeping in a parking lot in their car, that would count. And as you know, because you were part of the point in time count this year, we have different procedures for how to go about counting all of those folks, how to not wake people up if they're sleeping so that we don't scare them. So yes, those folks were counted.
Thank you. And I just really want to clarify that because I don't think that everybody realizes that when you live in your car that you're homeless. And I've got folks that live in their car in my district that are employed by Metro. So once again, just want to make that statement as we're getting ready to vote on this operating budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Huffman. Councilmember Benton.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple of questions, and one was, we obviously have to do the point-in-time count for HUD. And I was trying to understand, we have 2,180 at the point in time. And then we have our own month-to-month, which shows us at 33, 34. Now, was the point in time, was it January?
Yes.
We'd have to look back. So 3270. But there's, what, about 1,000 people difference. Now, what is that? Those we already have housed? What's that difference?
I'm really glad that you asked this question because I think that gets at a lot of the public. Okay, so the PIT count is done nationwide. I think folks are really familiar with the idea of the point in time count. I think it makes a lot of sense. One night we go out and we count everyone. And so, HUD puts a premium on those numbers just in the sense that they give us a good snapshot of what's going on in the country. But they are not necessarily the most accurate numbers of the total picture of homelessness in our community over the year. This is just the number of folks that we were able to lay eyes on one night. So yes, likely the numbers are probably higher, which is what we see in our monthly reports, because that is not just one night, right? Like that is throughout the month, and that is many, many different agencies providing lots of services. But I think that's a very fair point is our community should not look at the PIT count and say, this is the number of unhoused folks that we have. It's a useful metric, but it is not the only metric.
Go ahead.
You said we brought in a Colorado facilitator. I'm assuming this is an expert in the topic. And what was this individual's, say, some success history that that made us think, wow, this person will really be able to help us?
Yeah. So we, for quite a while, had been looking for a facilitator to come in and, yeah, lead some challenging conversations within our community. We, at first we sort of identified someone who we realized probably didn't have the skill set. Then we identified someone who has the skill set, but of dealing with much larger, more legal, more complicated situations. So we searched till we found someone who was just right. And luckily, it was actually recommended by one of our local agencies, People Loving Nashville. They do, services right down on Gay Street every Monday night. And their ED had identified this person as someone who he had known for a long time and knew was very, very good at this sort of, community crisis evaluation, communication type work. And
Oops, I'm sorry.
we met with him several times beforehand. We watched several videos that he had created. We looked through several tools that he had created. We had him sort of do many trainings for us before we, rolled this out to the whole community. So we did a lot of due diligence, and I think he was a really dynamic speaker. I think that the folks in attendance, it was very interactive. Everyone that I have spoken to has said that they felt that it was a really useful thing, particularly because it wasn't necessarily just high-minded. Let's all just, if we can just be our best self, it was much more, what are some of the issues that we see all the time, like concrete issues, and how do we work through these?
I guess I'm such a logical nerd. I'm always looking at things and saying, how do I make it better? And I think maybe I was thinking in terms of maybe some success stories in particular cities where he worked with them and they had a 10% reduction in the next 12 to 24 months, that kind of thing.
I would have to look into that and see. I don't have access to that right now. But he certainly has experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. How about any other questions for Allison? Councilmember Nash.
I don't have a question, but I was able, it was after that long public hearing on the budget night, but I did get up and catch a good part of the symposium, and I would encourage council members this next year, if at all possible, they had some excellent speakers, some excellent data, thought-provoking stuff on how we can address this housing issue in more ways and better ways maybe than what we're doing right now, or what things we're doing right that we need to continue. I thought it was very valuable.
Thank you for attending. I know they appreciated having some council members present. How about any other questions? Okay. Well, with that, I really appreciate you coming today. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all this information with us. Any other questions by the committee on any other issues? All right. Well, then we will consider ourselves adjourned.